Have you ever met someone so painfully stupid they couldn't even grasp how stupid they were? Of course you have. The real question is, have you looked in the mirror lately? Welcome back. Or welcome for the first time if you're new here. Probably stumbled in by accident, didn't you? Well, you're here now, and I'm about to shatter that comfortable little delusion you've been living in. Today, we're diving into the Dunning-Kruger effect, that delightful cognitive bias that makes incompetent people feel brilliant and brilliant people doubt themselves. Ironic, isn't it? The less you know, the more confident you feel. Nature's cruelest joke. But before we continue, let me ask you something that might sting a little. What's the one thing you consider yourself an expert in? Hold that thought. Now, what if I told you that your perceived expertise is likely just a sad manifestation of your ignorance? Uncomfortable yet? Good. That's where growth begins. The blissful stupidity of confidence. Let's get something straight right now. Confidence and competence are not the same thing, not even close. Yet we live in a world where the loud, confident voice drowns out the thoughtful, measured one. Why? Because confidence feels good. It's intoxicating. And we're all just addicts chasing our next hit. The Dunning-Kruger effect, named after psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, describes a cognitive bias where people with limited knowledge or competence in a specific area overestimate their abilities. In their 1999 study, they found that people who scored in the lowest quartile on tests of humor, grammar, and logic grossly overestimated their performance. Think about that. The worse people were, the more they overestimated themselves. Not by a little, by a lot. The bottom 12% estimated themselves to be in the top 38%. That's not just wrong, that's delusion on an epic scale. And before you sit there smugly thinking, well, that's not me, let me ask you, how can you be so sure? The very nature of incompetence robs you of the ability to recognize your own incompetence. It's a perfect trap. The Mount Stupid phenomenon. Picture a graph. On the x-axis, we have knowledge. On the y-axis, confidence. The relationship isn't linear, it's a curve, specifically what some call Mount Stupid. When you know nothing about a subject, your confidence is appropriately low. But gain a tiny bit of knowledge, just enough to be dangerous, and suddenly your confidence skyrockets. You've climbed to the peak of Mount Stupid, looking down on everyone else, utterly convinced of your superiority. Ever watched someone take a single class on psychology, and suddenly they're diagnosing everyone around them? Or someone who read one article on nutrition and now they're lecturing you about your diet? That's Mount Stupid in its natural habitat. But here's where it gets interesting. As you actually gain more knowledge, something fascinating happens. Your confidence plummets. You enter what's called the Valley of Despair. You realize how much you don't know. The complexity of the subject becomes apparent. The nuances, the exceptions to the rules. Most people never make it past Mount Stupid. Why would they? It feels fantastic up there. The view is great. Everyone else looks so small and insignificant. Why trade that for the discomfort of realizing your own limitations? Because that's the only path to actual competence. That's why. The hidden curse of expertise. Now let's talk about the other end of the spectrum. The experts who underestimate themselves. This is the less discussed aspect of Dunning-Kruger, but just as fascinating. True experts often suffer from the curse of knowledge. They know so much that they can't imagine others don't see what's obvious to them. They understand the complexity of their field so deeply that they hesitate to make definitive statements. It depends becomes their mantra. Meanwhile, the overconfident novice is declaring absolutes, speaking with unearned certainty, and gathering followers who mistake confidence for competence. That's the cruel irony. The fool speaks with certainty while the wise person hedges their bets. And in a world optimized for sound bites and hot takes, guess who wins the popularity contest? Have you ever noticed how the most thoughtful people you know are also the most hesitant to claim expertise? That's not coincidence. That's the natural humility that comes with genuine knowledge. The metacognitive trap. Here's where things get really twisted. Dunning-Kruger discovered that the skill needed to recognize competence is often the same skill needed to perform competently in the first place. In other words, if you're bad at something, you likely don't have the tools to recognize that you're bad at it. It's a metacognitive trap. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know it. Think about that for a moment. Let it sink in. The very people who most need to improve are the least likely to realize it. They're living in a bubble of self-delusion, protected by their own incompetence from seeing their incompetence. So what's the solution? How do we escape this trap? We don't. Not completely. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't something that happens to other people. It happens to all of us in different domains. I'm caught in it. You're caught in it. We're all caught in it. The best we can do is be aware of it, cultivate doubt, question our certainties, seek feedback, real, honest, brutal feedback. And when someone tells us we're wrong, consider the possibility that they might be right. The social cost of misplaced confidence. Now, let's talk about why this matters beyond your own deluded self-perception. There's a social cost to the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it's enormous. How many leaders have driven their companies into the ground because they were too confident to listen to warnings? How many relationships have ended because someone was too sure they were right to consider another perspective? How many lives have been lost because someone overestimated their abilities? The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just a quirky psychological finding. It's a force that shapes our world in profound and often devastating ways. Think about the people you know who are absolutely certain about complex topics they have no business being certain about. Politics, economics, health, science. They speak with unwavering confidence despite having never studied these fields in any depth. Now think about how many of those people are in positions of power. Scary, isn't it? The dark side of self-improvement. There's another angle to this that no one wants to talk about. The self-improvement industry is built on exploiting the Dunning-Kruger effect. Master this skill in 10 days. Become an expert in just one weekend. The ultimate guide to insert complex skill here. These promises prey on our desire for quick mastery and our inability to recognize how much we don't know. They sell us the peak of Mount Stupid as if it were the summit of true expertise. The uncomfortable truth is that mastery takes time, years, decades even. There are no shortcuts, no life hacks, no secret techniques that the experts are hiding from you. Just deliberate practice, feedback, failure, and the humility to recognize how far you still have to go. But that doesn't sell courses, does it? That doesn't get clicks or views or shares, because the truth is boring and hard and uncomfortable. The antidote: cultivated humility. So what's the antidote to this cognitive poison? Cultivated humility. I don't mean self-deprecation or false modesty. I mean the genuine recognition of your limitations. The ability to say, I don't know, without feeling diminished. The courage to be wrong. This is harder than it sounds. Our egos are fragile things. We protect them fiercely. Admitting ignorance feels like failure. Being wrong feels like weakness. But what if we reframed it? What if not knowing was the beginning of wisdom, not the absence of it? What if being wrong was an opportunity for growth, not a mark of shame? The most intelligent people I've ever met are comfortable saying 3 simple words. I don't know. Try it sometime. Feel the freedom in it, the honesty, the potential. The test of true knowledge. Here's a test I want you to try. Pick something you consider yourself quite knowledgeable about. Now, try to explain it to someone else. Not just the what, but the why and the how. The underlying principles, the connections to other domains. Struggling? That's normal. Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, said that if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. This is the basis of the Feynman technique, a brutal but effective way to identify gaps in your knowledge. The point isn't to make you feel stupid. It's to help you recognize where the edges of your knowledge actually are, rather than where you imagine them to be. Because true knowledge isn't just about accumulating facts. It's about understanding. And understanding is much harder to fake, especially to yourself. The path forward, embracing the unknown. So, where do we go from here? How do we navigate a world where confidence is rewarded more than competence, where the loudest voice is often the least informed? First, we need to get comfortable with uncertainty. Most of life exists in shades of gray, not black and white. If you find yourself absolutely certain about complex issues, that's a red flag. Step back. Question your assumptions. Seek out opposing viewpoints, not to refute them, but to understand them. Second, we need to redefine what it means to be intelligent. Intelligence isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking better questions. It's about approaching problems with curiosity rather than certainty. And finally, we need to recognize that ignorance isn't fixed. It's not a character flaw. It's a default state that we can change through learning, through experience, through the humility to admit what we don't know. The real tragedy isn't being ignorant. It's being ignorant of your ignorance. It's being trapped in a prison of your own making, never seeing the bars that contain you. So here we are. You've spent the last few minutes confronting a pretty uncomfortable truth. You're probably not as smart as you think you are. At least, not in all domains. But that's not bad news. In fact, it might be the best news you've heard all day, because once you recognize the limits of your knowledge, you can start to expand them. You can step off Mount Stupid and begin the journey through the valley of despair, up the slope of enlightenment, and eventually to the plateau of sustainability. It won't be easy. Your ego will fight you every step of the way. It will tell you that you know enough, that the extra effort isn't worth it, that you're already better than most people. Don't listen. The question isn't whether you're caught in the Dunning-Kruger effect. We all are. The question is whether you have the courage to acknowledge it and do something about it. So, what are you going to do differently after watching this video? What subject have you been overconfident about? What area of your life deserves more humility and more learning? Leave a comment below with one area where you're committing to being more curious and less certain. And if you found this brutal reality check valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more uncomfortable truths that just might change your life. Remember, the first step to being right is recognizing how often you're wrong. Until next time, stay curious, stay humble, and never stop questioning, especially yourself.